Welcome back to the final part of every Zelda town ranked. This is it, the best of the best, the cream of the crop, the top 10. It's been a long road from 75th to 1st, but we're finally here. If you want to start this countdown at the beginning, you can check out the link in the video description. It took me a long time to finish this one, and truth be told, I got a bit sidetracked working on another project. But better late than never, right? I have other videos on the way, so if you enjoyed this series, you can always subscribe and check those out soon. But this time we're ranking the top 10 towns in the Legend of Zelda series. There are still 4 more shop awards to be handed out, plus the final music award. And if this were a tier list, the top 6 towns would be my S tier, so those are the ones I really think are special. But all of these are great towns, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about my top 10. Here we go.
Number 10. Hyrule Castletown, Twilight Princess. It's a bit of a surprise even to me that Hyrule Castletown is in my top 10, because it's really the only town this high on the list that I have major complaints about. However, as I made my ranking and considered some of its better attributes, it kept slowly climbing, and here we are. But I'll start with my complaints, and my complaints mostly revolve around some terrible design choices, which at best might be considered homages to the N64 Castletown, and at worst, an unjustifiable regression for a series on its 7th home console game. First of all, the town uses fixed camera angles for its outdoor areas, which, why? I guess they were trying to make the camera capture the scale of the place, but coming off of Wind Waker, it just feels lazy. Second, why on earth is this town populated by so many NPCs that I can't actually interact with? I mean, I know why, it's to give the illusion that Castletown is a massively populated urban center, but still, that sucks. As far as I can recall, this and the Castletown of Ocarina are the only places this happens in the series, and I'm not here for it. Third, and I suppose we have to be a bit forgiving about this next criticism, because this game was pretty clearly straining the GameCube's hardware, but every section of this town is cordoned off by obnoxiously long loading screens. This might not be as annoying, but each individual area has so little going on that you're bound to encounter these loading screens just over and over again. So it's a technical fiasco, but I kept having to remind myself that there are things to like about this place. Not to contradict myself, but I actually like the fact that this is meant to be a huge city. That's never been done before or since in the series, and even though I think the technical execution was lacking, the concept is very cool. It actually feels like a big city, so I suppose I am suckered in a bit by the artificial hustle and bustle. There's also doggos you can pick up and pet and play fetch with, which is a nice touch. And although I don't feel the town is particularly cohesive, I really like some of the individual locations. The Star Game, for instance, is a top-tier minigame that's suitably fun and difficult and rewarding. There's a fortune teller who knows about heart pieces and story progress, and a wealthy man called Giovanni who lost his soul because he was too greedy. He was also transformed into solid gold, which feels like overkill, but Link can track down a bunch of Poe souls and restore his humanity in exchange for a portion of Giovanni's wealth. The breakout star of Castletown, though, is Agatha, the wealthy, self-proclaimed princess of the Insect Kingdom and MC of the glamorous Bug Ball. Agatha resides in a posh castle on the west side and rewards Link with wallet upgrades if he finds bugs to invite to her upcoming gala. Agatha and her signature parasol are bigger than Hyrule Castletown itself, and her brief role was enough to land her a spot as a playable character in Hyrule Warriors. You can also shop at one of the most exclusive boutiques in the series, Chudley's Fine Goods and Fancy Trinkets Emporium. At least, theoretically you can. Management won't let you in unless you shine your shoes first, and even then the cheapest item on display costs more than the biggest wallet can hold. Luckily, a series of side quests allows Link to aid Mallow, dead-eyed toddler and ruthless business tycoon, to purchase the Emporium and turn it into Mallow Mart Castle Branch. Afterward, the prices become more reasonable, including that of the magic armor, and Chudley is forced to work at the store dressed as a clown. Some babies eat peas and carrots, but this baby eats the rich. In honor of this corporate takeover, here's the 7th Shop Award. This is some shameless self-promotion. My favorite spot in Hyrule Castletown, though, is Telma's Bar. Bars have pretty typically been winners in the Zeldaverse, and this is no exception. It's the crux of several main quests, such as those involving the injured Prince Rallis, amnesiac Ilia, and the busty proprietor Telma herself. As Wolf Link, you can also chat with Telma's sassy fat cat Louise, who occasionally patrols the streets outside the bar. But the bar is also home to a seasoned group of resistance fighters, which makes it kind of feel like that bar in Les Mis. Even though they look like a group of friends playing a role-playing game, the warriors are actually gathered around a map of Hyrule, and each one plays a role in locating one of the game's major dungeons. This, more than anything, makes Hyrule Castletown feel like home base during the story. Number 9. Kakariko Village, Breath of the Wild. When I rolled into Kakariko on the back of my untamed starter horse, my first thought was basically,
Chewie,
It was an emotional reunion with the most classic Zelda town. There are familiar elements here, some of which have been neatly accentuated. For instance, Kakariko feels more like a mountain village than ever, which is nice in a game where mountains are not mere background abstractions, but actual scalable peaks. There's a small stone graveyard, which by now is a standard feature of the Sheikah settlement. And the village is littered with stray cuckoos, which Link of course can track down and return. Fun fact, by the way, the very name Kakariko comes from the French word Kakariko, which, did you know, is the French onomatopoeia for a rooster call. La Francais version of what we English speakers call cock-a-doodle-doo. However, as with most cultures in Breath of the Wild, the designers took the chance to update and expand on the Sheikah tribe as well. The Sheikah have never been more prominently featured than in Breath of the Wild, and this is an ancestral home worthy of their newly fleshed out culture. This time around, they're fully ninjas, and the standard medieval European aesthetic of Kakariko Village has been swapped out for the look of a feudal Japanese village, from paper lanterns and shrine gates to sloping thatched roofs and plum tree orchards. For better or worse, the classic theme has also been replaced by a traditional-sounding Japanese melody, which fits the new design. It also seems like the Sheikah in this game have thematic connections to archery, fireflies, and fruit. For whatever reason, the vast majority of Sheikah have fruit-inspired names, like Dorian, Meli, and Paya. Apparently, all the Sheikah in the game are from here, including the elderly researchers Rabi and Pura, and the traveling painter Pick and Go, who hands out several shrine quests over the course of the game. The locals are also packed with personality, such as a pair of villagers who feud over the best vegetable, a firefly-loving woman who makes nighttime visits to the grave of her slain lover, and an ex-member of the Hyrulean Yakuza, who just wants to raise his girls away from a life of crime. It's also the home of Impa, the Sheikah elder who Link hasn't seen. This version of Impa is a wise old matriarch who serves as the cultural memory of the Sheikah, and something of a spiritual advisor to Link. She's essentially the narrator of the game, and she's also been hanging on to Link's now iconic blue champion's tunic. Kakariko is the closest any town in Breath of the Wild comes to being a central hub town. You discover it early, it's centrally located, has a convenient warp point and shrine, and perhaps most importantly, is right next to a great fairy fountain, where you can grind out some equipment upgrades. Since Impa is the primary giver of main quests, and the focal point of the Captured Memories side quest, Kakariko is also the most central town to the game's main story. And by the numbers, Kakariko is tied with Zora's Domain for the most side quests in the game, although admittedly over half of them are cooking with Coco. It's just a very good town, and I really like the new direction for the Sheikah.
Number 8. Linna Village, Linna City, Oracle of Ages. Unlike Oracle of Seasons, which kind of split its attention between Horon Village and Subrosia, Ages went all in on its central hub town. Linna City is a place that spans multiple centuries, growing from a sepia-toned village to a full-fledged city. Over the course of the game, you'll flip back and forth between the timelines, gradually learning the relationship between them. While time travel is nothing new to the franchise, see Ocarina of Time, this was a significantly larger time skip than anything we'd seen before. So there's a lot of talk of ancestors and descendants and bloodlines, as well as the usual dose of time-bending puzzles and causal links. The only resident who spans the centuries is the Megu tree, and this version of the Megu tree is vastly superior to her male counterpart in Seasons. She has a personality, genuine concern for the characters, and we get to see her both as a sassy adult tree and a cute sapling with a crush on Link. One of my favorite things about Linna City is its close integration with the game's main storyline. In the past version of the village, Linna is a feudal kingdom, ruled by the previously good-natured Queen Ambi. However, ever since that no-good sorceress Nehru showed up, she's been enslaving townsfolk and forcing them to work round the clock to construct a tower to the heavens. To make matters worse, Varen uses Nehru's powers to make the sun stand still and manufacture a never-ending workday. Jeff Bezos is jealous. Between the Black Tower, the frozen sun, and the evil queen, Linna Village has almost biblical undertones. Throughout the game, the villain's progress is demonstrated by check-ins with the tower construction, and at 2 different points, Link enters Ambi's palace and interacts with the game's villainess. I like when a Zelda game checks in with the main story now and then, instead of putting it on the back burner until the very end. Apart from the Black Tower and Ambi's palace, which collectively occupy about as much space as the rest of the town combined, Linna Village features a fountain, a shooting gallery, a post office, an outhouse, and an oceanside dock. In the future, the layout remains essentially the same, but the city is somewhat modernized and is now governed by a mayor. And, lest we forget, it shares a shop award with Horon City for Vasu's Jewelers. There are a lot of Majora's Mask references in Ages, and this town includes the postman, the happy mask salesman, the woman who runs the doggy racetrack, and, last but not least, ... All of them are involved in the game's trading sequence, and make for some fun references. Linna City stays in focus throughout the game, as you often have to complete some activities here in between major story beats. My personal favorite is the quest involving a raft, a sea chart, and some proprietary rope. In the past, Raft and the Raft Maker is working on a seafaring vessel for Link, but can't complete the project without waterproof rope, which the local inventor Cheval is working on, but seems unlikely to complete anytime soon. The solution is to visit Cheval's grave in the future and acquire his life's work, the Cheval's rope, then bring it back to Rafton in the past for a bit of time-bending industrial espionage. That kind of quest requires the player to get to know the citizens in the town in order to understand how the pieces fit together, which really elevates a town experience. Number 7. Gerudo Town, Breath of the Wild. The best town in Breath of the Wild is also the hardest one to access. That's because it's strictly no boys allowed, so some serious subterfuge is required to infiltrate these desert ladies. I keep talking about how the designers jumped at the chance to punch up the cultures in this game, and the Gerudo have never looked better. For one thing, the town itself is gorgeous. It's a walled desert city, crisscrossed by tiled aqueducts that make it look like the Hanging Gardens. For another, the Gerudo are no longer copy-paste clones of one another, but actual individuals. Their new design emphasizes red hair, which better explains Ganondorf's genetics, and impressive height, which makes the Gerudo all look like Amazonian warriors. For another thing, this is the first time the Gerudo have appeared without focusing on their one male offspring, Ganondorf, and that really gave them a chance to shine. I like that the Gerudo have their own language, and I like that some of their terms have slipped into players' vocabularies, such as the terms vo and vi for man and woman respectively. The secrets of Gerudo procreation have also finally been explained, as it's apparently the sacred duty of Gerudo women to venture into the wide world and bag a husband, presumably bringing daughters back to be raised in Gerudo customs. The quest to enter Gerudo Town also forces the player to both learn the most important rule of Gerudo culture and direct considerable thought towards subverting it. The moment you finally enter the city is therefore extremely satisfying. But the main reason I love this town is how jam-packed it is. There's so many side quests and characters and little storylines here to discover. Within the walls, you can explore a large open-air market, commission custom jewelry at the Starlight Memories boutique, or take a class designed to teach Gerudo women how to date practically. You can grab a drink at the Noble Canteen, eavesdrop on afternoon gossips, or access the Secret Club to purchase a glow-in-the-dark skeleton outfit. You can solve a mysterious pollution problem by tracing water currents, or recover a stolen Gerudo heirloom from a banana-loving ninja clan. Outside the walls, you can converse with would-be interlopers, take part in high-speed sand seal racing, and hunt down giant sandworms for their medicinal properties. Plus, you can use information gleaned from Gerudo Town to solve some nearby mysteries involving bits of forgotten Gerudo lore. Also of note, Riju is the best leader of any of the 4 major cultures in Breath of the Wild, and one of my favorite NPCs in the game. She's the feisty young chief of the Gerudo tribe, and her storyline mostly revolves around her attempts to fill her mother's shoes as a great leader. She and her fluffy sand seal Patricia are top-tier racers, but when Link first arrives, she's dealing with much bigger problems. She quickly realizes that Link is a Vo, but enlists his help when she learns of his connection to her mother. The pair team up to subdue Va Naboris, the giant camel mech that's terrorizing Gerudo Town, and afterwards, Riju becomes a fierce ally. It all makes for a great town, and hopefully one that will catapult the Gerudo into even greater heights in future games. Number 6. Mabe Village, Link's Awakening. Mabe Village is an absolute pillar of Zelda history. It's the first handheld town, home of the original fishing minigame, and the starting point of the very first trading sequence. Trendy game, anyone? But perhaps most importantly, it's the original instance of a central hub town. You'll return to Mabe Village again and again during the game, sometimes for story reasons, sometimes to recharge, and sometimes just because it's a fun place to be. And it changes over the course of the game. Simple changes, sure, but important ones. At various points, Bow Wow the Chain Chomp is kidnapped by moblins, Marin goes off on singing and birdwatching excursions, and the statue in the town square is revealed to contain the resurrectable corpse of a magic flying rooster. Additionally, you can encounter residents of Mabe Village out in the world, like Terran, who gets both chased off by bees and transmogrified into a prank-loving raccoon, or Papal, who becomes stranded in the mountains, a fact he oddly foreshadows earlier in the game. And of course, you can always telephone the shy old man from the village for some cryptic plot advice.
It's me, Ulrira. Ask me anything about the island.
All of these quirky details were the start of a new direction for the Zelda franchise, a direction that's lasted straight through the present day. No longer would the Zeldaverse be a mere boilerplate medieval setting, but an increasingly vibrant mythology that welcomed the original, the eclectic, and the just plain weird. If you like that the series includes soup-loving yetis, time-traveling robots, or disembodied hands in search of toilet paper, you can thank this game, and Mabe Village, for straying off the beaten path. However, the real reason that Mabe Village is ranked so high is that it was the first town in the series to pack an emotional punch. To be honest, even though I like the Kakariko Village from Link to the Past and think it was an important step for the series, I don't really care about it that much. But Mabe Village was different. It was more than a home base. It was a home. Not just to the zany cast of characters, but to the player. As a kid, I knew the ins and outs of this place, the exact timing of the trendy game, ways to cheese the fishing minigame, and the locations of all the hidden heart containers and secret shells. It was the first game in the series that really encouraged you to get to know a town, and the tinkly soundtrack was the perfect nostalgic complement to the island settlement. All of this combines to make Mabe Village a fan favorite, and makes the end of the game all the more heartbreaking. As the entire dreamscape is wiped away by the waves of wakefulness, it's the disappearance of Mabe Village that hurts the most. One last detail. Mabe Village is the winner of the 8th Shop Award. Not because the town tool shop sells anything that exciting, but because its owner is from the Sheev Palpatine School of Electrocution Retribution. For some reason, the game designers programmed in the option for Link to steal items from the shop. Doing so results in all the characters in the game referring to Link as Thief, and when you sheepishly return, the smiling shopkeeper uses a devastating lightning blast to exact the ultimate price. Why this was included, and why the shopkeeper wields such awesome powers, is an unsolved mystery. Number 5. Kakariko Village, Ocarina of Time. There are 6 appearances of Kakariko Village in the series, but this, not the original, is the definitive version. Located in the foothills of Death Mountain, Kakariko is a tiered village with brick houses and a relaxing soundscape. I also like that Kakariko has a central landmark, the windmill. Not too many towns can be recognized by a single building, but this one can, and I think that's cool. Like all the towns in Ocarina of Time, there's a past and future version of Kakariko Village, but this is pretty much the only one that gets better after the time skip. It acts as something of a refugee camp, meaning that all the residents from Hyrule Castletown end up here. This includes the pair of jugglers, the dancing couple, the begging boy, and the proprietors of the bazaar, the potion shop, and the shooting gallery, the last of which occupies the building that was under construction during Link's childhood. It might be a bit crowded, but it also feels like the last bastion of humanity. Kakariko Village is worthy of historical designation for a few reasons. For one thing, it's the first time a town made a repeat appearance. That's a big deal, because it cemented Kakariko as an element of the mythos, and not just another in a series of random villages. For another, it served as both the introduction to, and the hometown of, the Sheikah tribe. The Sheikah tribe is a shadowy clan of ninja Illuminati types, of which Impa originally appeared to be the only active member. Still, the Sheikah are deeply associated with some of the bloodier bits of Kakariko's history, which perhaps is fitting for a ghost-infested town situated in the shadow of Death Mountain. At one point, I started to wonder if my nostalgia was getting the best of me on this one, mostly because Kakariko Village is a relatively small town. But then I started thinking about all the hidden details and crisscrossing plot lines and side quests, and I remembered that actually there's a lot going on here. There's the obligatory Kuko hunt, a trading sequence that involves both Granny's potion shop and Kajiro the Blue Kuko, and a wealthy family that's been cursed into half-human, half-spiders, which serves as the hub of the game's biggest collectathon. There's a graveyard, which contains the blood-soaked Shadow Temple, the haunted resting place of the royal composers Flat and Sharp, a mask-obsessed boy who idolizes the hunchbacked gravekeeper, and of course, Dampé's heart-pounding grave-digging tour, not to mention his even more heart-pounding, flame-throwing foot race in the afterlife. My personal favorite storyline involves a closed time loop, Guru Guru and the Song of Storms. In the future, the music man who runs the windmill can't stop playing the world's catchiest song, and complains about a kid in the past who used the song to spin the windmill out of control. In the past, Link can be that kid, and plant the earworm that both terrorizes Guru Guru and drains the village well. This is necessary, because at some point in the game an ancient demon is released from the well, and Link must drain it, venture underground, and locate the Lens of Truth. It's a stupid easy dungeon, but the concept itself is cool. It's home to zombies, torture devices, acid pools, and the freakiest mini-boss in the series, Dead Hand. When I list all that, Kakariko sounds incredibly creepy, but don't let that fool you. It's the most welcoming and relaxing and heartwarming locale in the game. That it contains so many blood-curdling secrets and still manages to feel like home is perhaps its greatest charm.
Number 4. Skyloft, Skyward Sword. Long before the clouds were populated by teleporting sky chickens, they were apparently occupied by ancient Hylians. This is their story. There's only one town in Skyward Sword, but it's one of the all-time greats. Another way to think about it is that Skyward Sword took all of its best town ideas and, instead of spreading them across multiple villages, consolidated everything into one floating city. Skyloft is composed of multiple islands floating high above the clouds, which is a really cool aesthetic. It feels like a very anime-inspired setting, and apparently we'll be revisiting whimsical Sky Islands quite soon in the sequel to Breath of the Wild. Skyloft, to me, perfectly captures that feel of mythical, idyllic prehistory. The residents worship a sky goddess called Hylia, and perform blessing rituals in her name, glide around the sky on the backs of giant winged companions, and tell stories about a mythical surface far below the clouds. The town comprises a residential area, a knight's academy, a giant marketplace housed under a colorful circus tent, and the Hylian version of Christ the Redeemer, watching over all. Skyloft is one of the ultimate central hub towns. Being the only cradle of civilization in an otherwise hostile overworld, it's the place to spend your time and money between the more adventurous bits of the game. And aside from a few very good dungeons, these interludes are my favorite parts of Skyward Sword. In addition to spending your hard-earned cash and collectibles on valuable upgrades at the Skyloft Bazaar, you can hunt for bugs, train with a sword, perform chores for the locals, and a hop, skip, and a jump away, work off your debt to the nearby pub, the Lumpy Pumpkin. There's a lot of great side quests here, many of which for some reason are mediated by a friendly demon called Batro. Batro lives under the village graveyard and initially seems to be responsible for kidnapping a local child, but is actually a harmless creature who just wants to be a real boy. Just like in real life, helping others with their problems generates glowing particles called gratitude crystals, which can be exchanged with a nocturnal demon for money and wallet upgrades. Batro is cool, I guess, but I always thought the gratitude crystal mechanic kind of felt like extra steps for no reason. The biggest and grandest part of Skyloft is the Skyloft Bazaar, which was literally my inspiration for doing a shop award in this countdown. This is almost certainly the best shopping scene in the series, both for its atmosphere and its mechanics. The soundtrack in the bazaar is dynamic and changes as you walk by the various shops. For example, a sitar is introduced as you pass the fortune teller, and a clanky percussion beat accompanies the mechanic station. But the bazaar also introduced something to the series that was long overdue: crafting. Both the scrap shop and the potion shop turn Link's hoard of gathered materials into meaningful upgrades. It's a tried and true gameplay loop, and it works perfectly in a series that's all about exploration. For what it's worth, even if the bazaar did not exist, I would likely be handing out a shop award to Skyloft anyway, because it's also visited daily by Beetle's Air Shop. My favorite version of Beetle's shop is powered by the man himself, who pedals ferociously in both senses of the word. If you have the audacity to visit the shop without making a purchase, he'll drop you through a trapdoor for your trouble. Skyloft is seriously one of the best towns around, but there's a couple small things holding it back from the top spot. For one thing, I wish there was just a bit more emotional depth here. The two best characters, Zelda and Groose, leave Skyloft early in the game and take a lot of the heart with them. It's also the case that too many of the side quests are cookie-cutter fetch quests involving that cheeky delivery robot. But most importantly, the top 3 towns just do slightly more to set themselves above the rest. Number 3. Hyrule Town, the Minish Cap. I will tell you right now, my top 3 were never in doubt. As far as I'm concerned, this is the very best two-dimensional town, and the best ever version of Hyrule Castle Town. If you haven't played Minish Cap, you're missing out. Hyrule Town is an amazing town in its own right. It features a library, shop, school, a bakery, a cafe, an inn, and an open-air street market. It's home to a crazy amount of fan-favorite characters like Beetle, Malon, Karlov, Nehru Din and Furore, Gorman, Anju, the Postman, and new faces like Swiftblade, the Swordmaster, Mayor Hagen, and the sleepy shoemaker Rem. It's a top-tier central hub town, and you first experience it alongside Zelda, who trounces a local merchant at his carnival game and wins you a dinky shield. However, the main gimmick here is that, unbeknownst to most citizens, dozens of tiny Minish secretly live throughout the town. After Link allies with Ezlo, he can shrink down to the size of a Minish and experience the town from a whole new perspective, and that's where the real magic lies. The Minish live in mushrooms, mouse holes, and furniture, and decorate their tiny houses with buttons, ribbons, and chess pieces. They do the kinds of things that tiny folklore peoples typically do, like make shoes for the cobbler while he's sleeping, steal bread from the local bakery, or play pranks on villagers. Outside, they chat with the village animals, which for some reason Link can also do whilst pea-sized. Despite being mostly scattered, they also have 2 major settlements, the rafters of the cafe and a second-floor bookshelf in the Royal Hyrule Library. In essence, this means that Hyrule Town is really several towns in one. I love the Minish aesthetic, and I love the way that this mechanic jams so many secrets and puzzles into what at first appears to be a relatively small town. There's so much to do and discover here, like mini-games, Kuko hunts, and an entire figurine gallery. Admittedly, this figurine gallery is not very fun to complete, but it still provides funny bits of flavor text for all the residents of Hyrule Town. As you master new sword techniques, the post office begins to publish a swordsman's newsletter, and each new item you acquire unlocks new secrets around and beneath the town. The oracles Nehru, Din, and Furore stay at the local inn, and eventually you can build a home for 2 of them.
Purportedly, this is a reference to the third Oracle game that never materialized, which is clever, but also not very satisfying. Also, I can't talk about this town without mentioning kinstone fusions. This mechanic is kind of hit or miss for me, but there's no doubt that the fusion fad is sweeping the nation. I almost can't believe the sheer number of kinstone events they programmed into this game, and it adds an extra layer to the town for completionists out there. My personal favorite quest in Hyrule Town is the entire library arc, which begins by asking you to solve a riddle from Minish lore. The legend refers to the Land of the Fearsome Beast, which turns out to be a cat. Then, in order to access the top library shelf and home of the Minish Elder Library, Link must track down overdue library books in order to fill the gaps in the bookshelf. I love this part, because not only do you have to do some serious detective work, but you also have to switch back and forth between human and Minish sizes, team up with animals, and use any means necessary to gather the missing books. I guess I just like how much fun this game wrings out of seemingly mundane tasks like returning library books. I feel like a lot of Zelda games have criminally underused their main gimmicks, but Minish Cap gets so much mileage out of Tiny Link, and a lot of the most clever ideas are found in Hyrule Town. Number 2. Windfall Island, the Wind Waker. This sun-drenched port of call for sailors and merchants is the most populous island in the Great Sea, and my second favorite town in the series. Once again, a main selling point is just how many things there are to discover here, and the way they unfold over the course of the game. Each visit to Windfall unlocks new secrets. You can fire up the central lighthouse and activate a giant Ferris wheel, decorate the town with flowers and flags, bribe local children for town gossip, or play the original Squid Game, complete with next-level sound effects. Splish! You can brew potions at the Chew Jelly Juice Shop, buy bombs from the world's only surviving manufacturer, or visit Beetle's floating shop just off the coast. There's also a long quest line that begins with a school teacher in a game of hide-and-seek with Windfall's most notorious gang of hardened delinquents, the Killer Bees, which leads to a collectathon through which Link can gain ownership of his own private island, complete with a butler who introduces the amusements of nobility to his young master. One subplot of Windfall is the tale of two fathers, both of whom have pointy-eared daughters who were kidnapped by the Helmarock King. Mila is a spoiled rich girl whose father owns an expensive mansion and demands payment if Link destroys his antique vases. Maggie, on the other hand, is poor and obsessed with moblins, and her father is a homeless beggar. Both fathers beseech Link to rescue their daughters, which he eventually does, but in a strange twist of fate, the two families have their fortunes reversed. Maggie is able to sell a large quantity of skull necklaces she acquired during captivity, which makes her and her father fabulously wealthy overnight, while Mila's father spends his entire fortune on his daughter's rescue, leading to a dramatic role reversal. The moral seems to be that money corrupts, because Maggie's formerly timid father becomes a pompous prick, and Mila's father realizes that his daughter's safety was far more important to him than money. I really like this kind of thing because it's not necessarily impactful to the story or anything, but it makes these characters and their hometown so much more memorable. While we're here, the 10th and final shop award goes to Zunari, who runs both a merchant stall and the nightly auction house. The merchant stall is the home of the game's island trading sequence, and the source of both the sail and the magic armor. It's also Mila's part-time job after being rescued from the Forsaken Fortress, and the scene of a dramatic stealth section during which Link has a real come-to-Jesus moment with Mila, who is struggling to accept her new position in life. The auction house is fantastic, unique, and hilarious, not to mention the home of many valuable items, such as a piece of heart, treasure charts, and in the HD remake, the Swift Sail. That swanky feeling when you literally stun the other participants with your fabulous wealth is, frankly, priceless. Windfall is also pivotal to the game's story, which to me is a big selling point for any town. After the prologue on Outset and the Forsaken Fortress, the story proper begins here. It's where you meet the King of Red Lions and a few other key figures, and the game asks you to fully explore the town before embarking on your adventure. As the central hub town of Wind Waker and the home of countless side quests, you'll return here many times over the course of the game. But the most dramatic visit happens during the Endless Storm, when Tetra and her pirate crew dock at the island and kidnap the local bomb maker. It completely changes the atmosphere of the island, which is awesome, and it's also the moment when Link and Tetra's alliance is solidified. With Tetra's help and a bit of eavesdropping, Link can infiltrate the pirate ship, steal some of their bombs, and beat them to the treasure they're after. However, my favorite thing about Windfall is everything to do with the Picto Box. The Picto Box is an old-timey camera that was stolen by Tingle, who is currently doing hard time for the crime. You can bust the light-fingered cartographer out of prison and search his cell for the stolen goods, after which the photographer Lenzo is willing to accept you as an apprentice. In order to prove yourself, you first must capture 3 very specific moments on film, which might be my favorite quest in the game. It requires some paparazzi-level stalking, and some pretty good timing to boot, but your reward is even more work.
Lenzo upgrades your Pictobox to the deluxe version, which shoots in color and allows you to capture any subject for the purpose of commissioning a figurine of their likeness. As an added bonus, you can photo-document the residents of Windfall Island, which unlocks some fun flavor text and trivia, and shows just how much thought and care went into this town. Number 1. Clocktown, Majora's Mask. Could it be anything else? Clocktown is the gold standard by which all other Zelda towns are judged. It has it all. Countless secrets to discover, top-tier writing and storytelling, striking atmosphere, emotional depth, and an unforgettable cast of characters. Did I make this whole list just to sing Clocktown's praises? Yes. Let's be honest, this entire countdown was basically a competition for second place. So, congrats Windfall, you did it. There's so much going on here, it's hard to know where to begin, but I'll do my best. First of all, it's impossible to overstate how much the 3-day time loop breathes life into this town. Most video game towns, even today, suffer from the fact that NPCs tend to stand in one spot and spout the same line over and over again. This is boring and unrealistic, but an understandable reality of technical limitations. But the 3-day time limit and the intricate timetables of Clocktown provide both a dynamism and a logic to NPC actions that's missing from other games. It makes sense that an NPC would sit on a bench in the park during the first night, because, that's what they happen to be doing at that time. As a kid, I spent quite a few real-life days stalking these residents and learning the ins and outs of their schedules. It was a painstaking process, but always motivated by the thrill of new discovery. Bit by bit, you piece together a mental schedule for the town. On the second day, it always rains. In the morning, the postman picks up mail, but in the afternoon, he trains his timekeeping skills. At 4 p.m. on the first day, a Goron from out of town checks into the hotel. At night, the inn and the shops close, but the milk bar opens and street performers dance in the torchlight. At 1 a.m. during the night of the first day, a mugging occurs. Almost every resident has a story, some of which are extremely poignant, and even the most minor characters have something to say. If I had to highlight just one resident, the breakout star is Anju, the put-upon proprietor of the Stockpot Inn, whose fiancé has mysteriously vanished in the days leading up to the carnival. Her story is central to a spiderweb of plot threads that includes identity theft, purse snatching, mysterious curses, 12-hour bedtime stories, a wedding, a mayoral scandal, and one extremely committed postman. One tool that helps you track both the convoluted timetable and the bedeviled cast of characters is the Bomber's Notebook, a magical planner that records the needs and schedules of citizens, and plays this satisfying sound when you manage to solve a person's troubles. Link receives the notebook after a successful game of hide and seek, and let me just interrupt myself to say that clearly the ingredients of a top Zelda town are the presence of Tingle and a game of hide and seek. I don't know what that says about the series or about me, but Tingle is hanging in or around all of my top 3 towns, and all of them involve some form of hide and seek. Anyway, I recently played Outer Wilds, which is a terrific game with a time loop that was partially inspired by Majora's Mask, and I was struck by the similarities between the ship's log in that game and the Bomber's Notebook. Both serve not only as reminders and trackers of your progress, but also as an intriguing pool of leads that pull you deeper into the game's mysteries. What is Anju doing between the hours of midnight and 1 a.m., you may well wonder, and feel inspired to investigate. That's a really good mechanic. For a game themed around masks and identity, one of the coolest parts of Clocktown is how many different ways you have to interact with residents. Not only does their behavior change depending on the time of day and the current state of affairs, but they also respond to Link differently depending on his current form. For example, stray dogs are hostile towards Deku Link, afraid of Goron Link, and friendly towards Zora Link. Citizens show racism towards certain forms, answer questions about Cafe if you wear his mask, or admit you to the members-only bar if you wear the appropriate headgear. It allows you to be really creative and intentional with your interactions. This is a game about wearing many hats, and in addition to his out-and-out transformations, Clocktown sees Link take on the roles of postman, private investigator, musician, real estate agent, astronomer, matchmaker, therapist, mediator, and professional dancer. I don't know how I got this far without mentioning it, but of course, the main theme of Clocktown is its imminent destruction. Actually, the 2 events on the horizon are the annual Carnival of Time and a fiery collision with an angry moon, which gives the town a demented energy as both celebrations and panic intensify. The combination of the looming moon and the giant clock tower at the center of town provide Clocktown with a wonderfully ominous atmosphere. This is further enhanced by the increasingly frantic soundtrack, which brings me, at last, to my final music award. See how I saved it for the final minutes of this list? I love the Clocktown soundtrack, but I really love the way it changes over the 3 days. I like that I can tell you what day it is merely by listening to the score, and the Final Hours track is appropriately apocalyptic. The perfect musical journey for a town as dark and dynamic and detailed as Clocktown. There's so much more I could say about this place, but the main point is this. From start to finish, Clocktown is the best town in The Legend of Zelda.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks if you watched all 7 parts of this countdown. I'm excited to see where the series heads next with towns, whether we'll see familiar towns get recycled, or whether the next game will introduce any unique and original settlements to explore. I can say that the series definitely seems to be headed in the right direction with towns, so we can only hope. Maybe one day a new town will relegate the frantic citizens of Clocktown to second place, but until then we can enjoy revisiting the past 35 years of Zelda towns. This ranking took a lot more time and effort than I expected, but I'm relatively happy with how it turned out. Let me know what you think of my choices. What's your favorite town in the Legend of Zelda series, and why? Were there any surprises on this list, or did it pretty much fall the way you expected? Leave a comment below and help out the channel. I'm pretty far along on some new projects, and I have one really big project in mind, so I hope to keep going with new content and having fun with it. You can always subscribe if you want to see what comes next. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.